Revealed. The incredible transformative journey of Hades, a touching myth you never knew existed. Hayden leaned back in the creaky chair of the dimly lit library. An unmarked book sprawled open before him. The air around him shimmered with sweat and fading dreams, each corner of the room echoing tales of lost souls. He felt the weight of his father's stories of resilience humming in his chest, a mixture of warmth and pressure. But here, he wasn't just a mechanic. He was the sole caretaker of a family legacy laced with shadows. Could he, the boy from this struggling town, ever achieve anything tangible past the greasy overalls and laborious days? A sudden noise startled him. A couple of local men were chuckling nearby. "Just look at Hayden," one remarked. "Always with his nose in those old books. Thinks he's wiser than us." Their laughter lashed out at him like a whip. He shrank deeper into the folds of his hoodie, trapped inside the cacophony of their disdain. A dark surge of doubt washed over him. Was he meant to live as a mere footnote in their lives? As he flipped through the pages, a crumbling parchment slipped out, revealing an ancestral story darker than rich soil. What he discovered gave rise to both intrigue and terror. A historical injustice buried deep within his lineage. It reeked of betrayal, exploitation, the very ground he walked upon having been tainted by the oppressors who robbed his family of their dignity. The moral dilemma twisted, demanding clarity. Did he insist on rewriting history for vindication? Or did reconciliation tie his blood to a more profound purpose? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The following evening, he followed the faint scent of old books to trusty Evelyn, a retired history professor with a demeanor that bridged the gap between mentor and maternal figure. As she traced his scribbles of family names across the dusty desk, Hayden's palms grew clammy. Was he about to plunge into a world that revealed both his ancestor's strength and the plight he was destined to challenge? The unrelenting fear of exposure prickled at him. What if this tale forced him to confront an unforgiving town unwilling to recognize his humanity? His heart pounded as he said the words that transformed the rest of his life. What if I unravel the truth? With that admission came a tidal wave of dread, squeezing his chest tighter. Who would care about a mechanic whose family name had been sullied by time? With tension building, he wrestled with self-doubt. Was he just an unqualified storyteller playing with ancient tales? Or was he more than the judgment of others? In anticipation of revealing his discoveries that could challenge the very fabric of his town, a cold, clammy hand gripped his heart. The revelation that would shatter his sense of identity was looming. What if this journey changed him into someone feared rather than accepted? Someone who challenged rather than conformed? Desperation clawed at him, aching to break free. The shadows cast by his lineage were more than echoes. They were looming specters that swallowed light. Just as he prepared to pen the first line of revelation, an unexpected twist unraveled the fabric of his confidence. Was he the hero of this tale or merely a pawn? Would the legacy of his past be enough to navigate his turbulent future? The weight of his lineage bore down, and the clock ticked perilously close to a choice that would define him forever. Hayden's pulse raced as he paced the creaky floorboards of the library. The stroke of indecision had become a heavy burden, pressing down through his chest like a vice. Would he step into the harsh light of truth or dwell within the shadows of oblivion, forever a flicker of potential rather than a flame? Each whispered mocking laughter replayed in his head, taunting him with the haunting echo of worthlessness. Evelyn's calm yet piercing gaze broke through his spiraling thoughts. You mustn't allow fear to dictate your path, Hayden, she urged, leaning closer with a sincerity that pierced through his doubt. Breaking the silence of your ancestors may illuminate the very truths that have long been ignored. The flicker of her belief sparked something within him. Perhaps, just perhaps, he could challenge the narrative woven by time and shed light on the shadows he had been clinging to. Armed with determination, he gathered the research he had painstakingly compiled. He was not merely a mechanic. He was a historian with a mission, the guardian of a legacy begging to be uncovered. Each night, he immersed himself deeper into the past, analyzing names and dates, weaving together the fragments of his family's history into a narrative worth telling. The flicker of excitement ignited a sense of purpose, yet unease nibbled at the edges of his resolve. Every time he stopped and gazed at the mirror, he saw a boy on the brink of manhood, wrestling with the demons of identity. Beneath the surface, he questioned the very foundations of his character. Was he capable of rising above the shame that haunts his bloodline? As weeks rolled into months, his understanding deepened, and with it, so did the intricacies of his moral compass. He could feel the weight of the forgotten stories lodged beneath the floorboards of his town. Each revelation drew him closer to confronting not just his ancestors' truths, but also the oppressive weight of public opinion that held him prisoner. The town was steeped in silence, and he was the catalyst, poised to disrupt the status quo. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, he stood on the outskirts of town, clutching an unbalanced but sturdy notepad filled with words that felt dangerously powerful. The baritone growl of an approaching storm mirrored the tension in his gut. Faced with the crumbling ruins of a monument erected as a narrative facade, he realized this was not simply research. It was a call to arms. Sweat dotted his brow. Coming forward meant tearing down the veil of complacency wrapped around their collective conscience. With the teachings of Evelyn and the fierce love for his family behind him, he took a deep breath, his decision crystallizing amidst the brewing tempest. Would his town embrace the stories lurking just beneath the surface, or would they retaliate with their misplaced loyalty to a sanitized past? The ghosts of his ancestors stood behind him, whispering their hopes and dreams, a collective voice rising to break the chains of silence. Determined, Hayden stepped back into town, notebook in hand, the storm awaiting his words that would transform their understanding of history. Would courage propel him forward, or would doubt tether him in place, shackling his potential to a legacy he never chose? With shadows lengthening behind him and the promise of confrontation ahead, he could feel the weight of destiny shifting, setting the tone for a conflict that lay just ahead, a conflict that would redefine who he was meant to be. The time had come to face those who scoffed, to challenge not just the town's perception but to reclaim his narrative entirely. The air was thick with anticipation as Hayden wandered through the narrow streets of the town, his notepad clutched tightly against his chest. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighted by the knowledge he had unearthed. He debated within himself. Could he truly rewrite the narrative that the town had clung to for generations? As he passed familiar storefronts, they seemed to stare back at him with skepticism, their painted signs weighed down by years of collective expectation. He remembered the years spent under the suffocating blanket of conformity, trying to mold himself into someone palatable to others. But those days were behind him. Now, he was on the verge of confronting not only his heritage but also the unyielding perceptions of those around him. He arrived at the community center, a modest building that stood as a gateway for town events, but was also a prison of tradition. The shadows within told stories of countless meetings where dissent was silenced, where differing narratives were dismissed. Hayden pushed through the door, an audacious mind ready to challenge the darkness within. His heart thrummed in sync with the ticking clock on the wall as he set his notebook on the lectern. The soft glow of the overhead lights illuminated words that had simmered beneath the surface for far too long. Around the room, faces he recognized shifted uneasily, whispers passing like the fluttering wings of caged birds. "Thank you for coming." His voice broke the silence, steady but laced with gravity. He felt a wave of urgency surge within him. He could not back down now. "Today, I'm here to share stories lost to time, buried beneath years of neglect and shame." The murmurs intensified, skepticism woven into their fabric. Hayden's resolve firmed. He recounted the lives of his ancestors, the realities that lay hidden behind the polished veneer of the town's history. As he spoke, the courage residing within him transformed into an eloquent force. "Face it," he said, locking eyes with his childhood nemesis, Derek, who scoffed from the back of the room. History isn't just carved in stone. It pulses with the breath of those who lived it. We honor their legacy not by glossing over their truths but by embracing them. The energy in the room swirled around him, shifting like the storm outside. Would they listen? The seeds of doubt loomed, but yet, he pressed on, faster now, channeling his fears into words that demanded to be acknowledged. I understand that the truth may upend what you believe. But are we not better off acknowledging our flaws, confronting our mistakes? Only then can we truly move forward. He could see his words cutting through the thick fog of resignation that in that moment, something shifted. A choice lay before him, to choose confrontation or to seek understanding. He felt the eyes of the townsfolk, no longer merely scoffers, but witnesses to a transformation emerging from within. As he concluded, silence enveloped the room, a living entity filled with anticipation. Would they reject him or rally around this newfound awareness? Hayden took a deep breath, aware that the next few moments could change everything. Then, in the back of the room, another voice emerged, tinged with confusion and resentment, contrasting sharply against the vulnerability he had bared. But what if what you say isn't true, Hayden? What if you're tearing us apart? It was Derek again, challenging the very foundation of what Hayden thought was becoming a bridge. The question hung in the air, an opening for both confrontation and deeper revelation. Hayden's heart raced, 1,000 thoughts flicking through his mind. This was the moment. Would he stand firm against the tide of opposition, or would he falter in the face of resistance? The journey within him had led him here, but now, he was at the precipice of a greater challenge defending his truths. And yet, the lines between past and present collided. Or maybe, he countered, emboldened, tearing apart lies will ultimately bring us closer. The tension rose, an electric current sparking between them, the storm outside echoing the emotional disharmony. And as he stood poised at the edge of retribution, Hayden understood that this was just the beginning of a confrontation that would not only rewrite the history of a town but, more importantly, redefine the story of who he truly was destined to become. Hayden stood in the stillness, each pair of eyes locked on him, awaiting his next word. The weight of Derek's challenge thrust him into the depths of an internal struggle. Could he defend this newfound identity while risking further alienation? A swell of doubt threatened to dampen the spark ignited within him. He inhaled deeply, drawing strength from the memories of those he had spoken about just moments ago, their struggles, their truths. Think about it, he pressed on, leaning into the discomfort that radiated from Derek. We've been taught to fear uncertainty, to cling to the comfortable narrative we all know like a crutch. But comfort can be a cage. If we tear it down, perhaps we'll find something much richer beneath. Derek scoffed, crossing his arms tightly across his chest. The tension spiraled as Hayden's resolve solidified. This wasn't just a debate about history. It was a reflection of his own journey toward authenticity. Navigating through his childhood influenced by Derek's perpetual mockery had shaped him into someone wary of his own voice. But today, he was taking the reins. The murmurs subsided, curiosity draping over skepticism like a fragile veil. Hayden sensed it was time to share more than just facts. It was time to strip away the layers of his own vulnerability. I've spent years suppressing stories because I feared they wouldn't be accepted. And yet, embracing those stories allowed me to embrace who I am. What if you find, buried within your own truths, a sense of freedom? A flicker of unease transformed the expressions around him. Hayden's heart raced as he confided further. He spoke of the shame that shadowed his family's past of struggles with addiction, raw threats of violence, secrets so powerful that they might shatter the fragile harmony of the town. As he unfolded each confession, he felt lighter, as though each word pierced a lingering shroud in his heart. Seeing Derek's squinted eyes soften momentarily, he pressed deeper. It's time we allow our past to live next to us, not beneath us. We cannot continue to thrive if we're dragging dead narratives along for the ride. The room lay in silence, absorbing the gravity of his words. But just as resolve settled within him, the shadow of Derek's doubt loomed larger. You think you're saving us? How can we trust your version of the truth? You've altered everything. Hayden felt the sting of Derek's accusation, challenged in a way that triggered old insecurities. Was he truly justifying his own desire for acceptance with increased scrutiny? But this was not about him. This was about necessary revelations for healing. With every fiber of his being, he responded to Derek's discontent, asserting, "Truth is not a single story, it's a tapestry knitted with many threads. Each perspective broadens our understanding." He saw the faces before him shift from doubt to contemplation, while some wrestled with the conflict between loyalty to tradition and the call of newfound possibility. Hayden drew a shaky breath as he sensed the tide of change could be rippling beneath the surface. That it was there, amid the uncertainty, that a spark ignited within him a realization of his purpose. He was not just rewriting narratives. He was forging connections where chains of isolation once resided. Success would not merely be in changing their perspectives but also in facilitating healing both for himself and for the town. As he glanced around the room, confidence began to swell. "I'm not here to tear you apart, Derek. I'm here to help us find our strength through authenticity. Perhaps it's through confronting our own fears and weaknesses that we'll truly know how to build this town into something we can share." The clock ticked in the background, the pulse of the room thrumming with new energy. Would they accept the challenge to evolve? And just as he thought he had planted the seeds of understanding, a soft voice broke through the lingering silence. "But what if this means we have to let go of everything we've known?" It was someone Hayden had not expected, an elderly man from the corner, his face etched with lines of a lifetime shaped by that very path. At that moment, Hayden realized he was standing not at the edge of a debate, but on the precipice of a profound revelation. The shift in collective consciousness could either bolster him or send him spiraling back into doubt. He sensed that the hardest road ahead was not just facing external criticism, but also navigating his own burgeoning fears of who he was striving to become, fears of the potential rejection of the truth he sought to embrace. The time had come for him to confront not just Derek, but the very nature of allegiance to the past that risked his future. Would he choose to stand firm, even if it meant sacrificing the safety of familiarity? With tumultuous emotions swirling within him, Hayden knew the battle for honesty and identity had only just begun. As the murmurs of disbelief filled the room, Hayden felt a jolt of anxiety grip him. Every pair of eyes bore deeper scrutiny, every mind wrestling with its own apprehensions. He searched for a foothold amidst the swirling uncertainties, desperate to articulate his vision without faltering. Authenticity felt like a fragile promise, a single misstep aimed at the already teetering balance of tradition and change. "Letting go doesn't mean erasing our past," he began, his voice steadying. "It means acknowledging that our history lives within us, can empower instead of haunt us." Derek shifted uncomfortably, but Hayden pressed on. "I'm not asking you to abandon what you believe but to expand it. Imagine the strength of a community that can face its shadows together, the deeper conversations, the deeper connections. That's my vision." The old man nodded pensively, as if Hayden's words resonated on a frequency long forgotten. Encouraged, Hayden transitioned from abstract ideas to something more concrete. "Consider this. What if we could start a story-sharing circle? A safe space where we could all voice our truths, the painful alongside the joyous? Not just a recounting, but a healing dialogue, interweaving all our narratives into one stronger narrative of who we are." He glanced around, witnessing the hesitation shift slowly. Some heads nodded slowly, while others remained firmly skeptical, clinging to their established beliefs. Skepticism was palpable in the air, yet hope, against all odds, seemed to glimmer in some eyes. "For years, I feared my own truth," Hayden continued, his tone becoming earnest. "But the moment I embraced my story, it opened doors I never even knew existed. I began to understand that I wasn't alone in this. Many of us concealed our stories, thinking silence would keep us safe. But silence breeds loneliness." With that, he recalled a mentor from his past, a woman who taught him the power of vulnerability. The lessons lingered with him, threaded into his character. He resolved to channel that energy into the present, still living inside him. "I won't promise that facing these truths will be easy," he acknowledged, meeting the eyes of each reluctant listener. But it can be liberating. It's the first step toward building trust among us again. Imagining a town transformed through acceptance, isn't that worth the risk? Some faces softened as he spoke. The emotional toll of Hayden's own realizations illuminated his sincerity. But Derek's brow furrowed deeper, a stone statue amidst the shifting tides of conversations. His resistance hardened. And what if we fail? What if confronting our past destroys the town we cherish? Hayden's heart raced. Derek's fear echoed his own. The subtle recognition of their shared vulnerability sent a flicker of resolve coursing through him. What if the real threat lies in staying stagnant, drowning in the weight of unspoken truths? What if discussing it is the key to survival? A pregnant pause hung in the air, thick with potential but precariousness, the question lingering uncomfortably, testing Hayden's mettle. Could he transcend Derek's hardened demeanor and transform this trepidation into a catalyst for authenticity? Suddenly, an unexpected voice chimed in, a younger woman seated toward the back who hadn't yet spoken. I want to know more. I'm tired of skimming the surface. Maybe we should try. The admission sent a jolt through the gathering, igniting expressions of surprise. In that moment, Hayden understood. Even one brave voice could tenderly nudge the walls of silence and distrust. They could slowly begin to dismantle the fear that shackled them. Each hesitant revelation could crack the facade of certainty, enabling freedom to filter through. Fueled by this flicker of hope, Hayden steeled himself for Derek's next syllable. Would he become a bridge toward openness, or would he further fortify their defenses? Hayden was learning that the journey toward courage was as much about facing antagonists as it was about standing firm against the emotional tempest within. Derek, he began, voice fortified, the real question lies at your feet. Are you willing to confront your fears for the sake of something greater? The vulnerability in his voice cast a raw sort of tension. Would change sprout from this moment? Or would old wounds silence the whispers of possibility? The silence fractured, but only slightly, as Derek's eyes scanned the room, searching for allies among the uncertain. Hayden felt a weight settle in his stomach, an acute awareness that the next word spoken could either usher in change or reinforce the walls that had held them captive for too long. What tremors of transformation lay veiled by the chilling specter of fear? Derek began, hesitating while the fire in Hayden's chest flickered with impatience. The older man clenched and unclenched his jaw, body rigid with the conflict tearing at him. Each second that passed felt like an eternity, the pulse of hope and dread beating in tandem, reinforcing the frailty of this pivotal moment. Let us say I'm willing to listen. Derek's statement hung in the air, cautious yet significant. But what then? How do we ensure this doesn't turn into a festering wound, worse than what we're already dealing with? By facing it together, Hayden replied, his voice now colored with the urgency of his conviction. This isn't just a conversation. It's a shared responsibility. We build that trust with small petal-like steps. Each story shared is another thread woven into our fabric. We can find healing, not at the expense of our history, but as its continuation. Derek regarded him with a mixture of admiration and skepticism, the battle in his eyes unyielding. There was a glimmer of something unspoken, an acknowledgement that beneath the fear lay a flicker of curiosity. Hayden seized upon it, determined to fan that flame. It's a journey into the unknown. And look, Hayden gestured toward the younger woman who had spoken up. This brave voice is just the start. She's expressed a desire to know more. There's strength in vulnerability, and sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply to show up and share our truth. The weight of his words settled heavily around them, igniting a curious resolve. Hayden noticed others begin to shift in their seats. This was a pivot, albeit small. A crack to upend the foundation of complacency. I want to say something. A man sitting near the front finally interjected, a tremor of apprehension coursing through his tone. I've held onto a burden that's isolating. I think I could share it, but it feels so terrifying. Terrifying is the first step toward freedom. Hayden responded, feeling a surge of pride at the questioning spirit emerging from the crowd. You are not alone. Your story intertwines with the collective tale, it can inspire others to face their own shadows. The man nodded, visibly shaken yet resolute. Encouragement washed through Hayden as the conversation began to ripple beyond expectation. Although doubt continued to lurk in some corners, others were catching on. Was courage the antidote to their silent discontent? Derek remained stoic, but Hayden discerned an internal struggle playing out behind his eyes. He was a fortress, fortified by years of tradition, yet the cracks were beginning to show. Would Derek's wall ultimately collapse, revealing the man who could see the potential for a shared narrative? As discussion sparked, voices punctuated the air with tentative certitude, each person giving voice to thoughts that had long been shackled. Hayden felt himself rising on a swell of connection, a bridge built between fear and realization. But as excitement lingered, doubt clenched at him. Would this budding openness hold? Or would they retreat once Derek's skepticism surfaced again? Instinctively, he understood that authenticity required continual nurturing. It was not a one-time convening. It would demand dedication, a sustained commitment to shine light on the shadows. When Derek finally spoke again, Hayden's heart raced. Okay, let us say I'm interested in this story-sharing circle. Just how do we get started? The man's question was fraught with caution but still carried a hint of willingness. A rush of hope surged through Hayden, but simultaneously, a reminder of the scale of commitment doused it. Could they truly open the floodgates to honesty and vulnerability? By committing to meet, by listening and offering our truths, we'll need to establish rules to keep the space safe. Confidentiality. Respect. It's going to require every ounce of honesty we can gather, he asserted, excitement mingling with apprehension. As they began to delve into logistics, a chill swept through the room. Would this moment of vulnerability morph into true connection, or would caution rule the day? Amidst the pragmatic discussions, one thing reverberated in Hayden's mind: how far was he willing to go to turn hope into actionable change? What hidden truths within himself were yet unexplored? What if the time had come for him to confront his own past, revealing wounds he had forbidden himself to touch? The atmosphere thickened with anticipation, teetering precariously on the edge as they bravely ventured toward transformation. Yet, just as momentum built, an unnerving thought emerged. Maybe stepping into this collective uncertainty could unveil vulnerabilities Hayden had kept buried for too long. What awaited him behind those veils of fear? Would confronting his own hidden struggles become a defining chapter in his courageous journey? Hayden's heart drummed a complex rhythm as the discussions surrounded him, each new voice layered with hope yet pierced by underlying fear. It was both invigorating and daunting. Words flowed, spilling thoughts that had remained unarticulated for too long, but each revelation weighed heavily on him, beckoning him toward his own unexamined depths. As he listened, a gnawing realization unfurled within. Wasn't he just as much a part of this silence, the same silence he so vehemently sought to dismantle? The thought gnawed at the fragments of his self-perception. Once a driven leader confident in his role, he now felt like an imposter poised at the edge of a precipice. After the last voice faded, Hayden seized the moment, compelled to step forward, yet a tremor of uncertainty anchored him. I appreciate everyone's courage today, he began, swallowing the bitter taste of honesty. But I must admit, while we've started to uncover shared truths, I've been hesitant to share my own. The room quieted once again, a collective breath held as they leaned into what he might reveal. Derek's eyes fixed on him, curiosity mingling with caution, as if gauging Hayden's resolve to scale the walls he wanted others to dismantle. I've always believed I needed to present a facade of strength. In my efforts to guide others, I haven't always addressed the personal shadows lurking in my life. With each word, tension coiled within him, both magnetic and repulsive. Would they see him differently, or worse, would they pull away? I lost my brother 3 years ago. It was an unexpected, tumultuous experience that left me grappling with grief and guilt. Guilt for not being there when it mattered most. Guilt that I couldn't save him. His voice cracked, revealing images of lapsed moments that haunted his nights. I buried that pain, thinking it would make me stronger, enable me to support others. But in creating this distance between my heart and my experience, I've only reinforced my own isolation. As his confession hung in the air, an astonished silence heralded a critical shift. The burden he clung to for so long slipped into the space between them, an unintentional invitation for vulnerability. Feedback rippled through the room, a shared understanding, a collective recognition of the threads they all mulled over but seldom dared to speak. Derek's previously stoic demeanor cracked as he absorbed Hayden's revelation. The skepticism softened in his eyes, replaced by something that resembled empathy. "I had no idea you endured that. Thank you for sharing. I think we all have pieces of ourselves we've locked away." There was an undeniable shift toward solidarity, a sense of camaraderie blossoming in the wake of each distressing truth divulged. One by one, individuals began to mirror Hayden's courage, offering snippets of their own stories riddled with loss, resilience, and healing. Each account wove deeper connections, forging bonds from frailty and shared experiences. Yet, as poignant as these moments felt, Hayden wrestled internally with a need for greater depth. He stood at a crossroads, empowered yet terrified. His bravery had birthed a revelation, but hidden within was a deeper calling. Each shared story propelled him further into the explorations of his own heartache. Would he allow this to be enough, or would he face the raw, uncomfortable truths that might lie beneath? As the group began to discuss ways to move forward, potential topics for discussion swirling amongst them, Hayden felt an even deeper unease. What if others, including Derek, managed to confront their pain and emerge transformed? Yet he remained held captive by his own fears. Would his own journey facilitate growth, or would it simply distract from the authentic sharing that had taken root? The questions pounded in his veins, a relentless pulse demanding attention. "Let us reconvene next week," he proposed. "But this time, let us not just share the surface. Let us dive deeper. I know I have much more to unpack, and I suspect others do too." The room buzzed with agreement, yet an invisible tension lingered. As the meeting dispersed, a knock echoed at the door of Hayden's consciousness. What more would he uncover about himself, and how much of his own hurt might call upon him to step into the genuine connectivity and honesty he craved? The moment had arrived for him to brace himself for a confrontation with the past that loomed ever-present. Would he find the strength to peel back those layers, or would he see himself retreat into the shadows once more? The choice would be his alone to make. As the weight of this new understanding settled around him, Hayden felt a chaotic sense of urgency swell. Within, could he embrace the transformative potential awaiting him without stepping back into silence? Hayden returned home, the weight of the meeting pressing down on him like a shroud. Each step felt heavy as he reflected on his vulnerabilities laid bare in front of others. But as he walked through his front door, a flicker of determination began to ignite within him, wrestling his fears into submission. He needed to confront this next phase of his journey not just for himself, but for the group that had begun to trust him with their truths. Settling down in his dimly lit living room, he stared at the walls adorned with photographs that whispered remnants of happiness and loss alike. The frame holding his brother's image caught his eye, a bittersweet reminder of shared laughter now eclipsed by regret. Hayden blinked back the tears that threatened to spill, drawing in a deep breath. He wasn't here to wallow. He was here to discover. Taking a moment to gather his thoughts, he pulled out a notebook he had abandoned long ago. Flipping to a blank page, he briefly contemplated his goals. What was it he sought to unveil? Where were the deeper layers he needed to scrape back in order to recognize his authenticity? The answers hid like ghosts, silently influencing his actions and thoughts but never revealing their presence outright. He began scribbling down questions, letting the ink spill onto the page with an urgency that mirrored the tide of his emotions. What did he truly grieve? Was it entirely his brother's absence? Or was it the loss of a version of himself, one who felt brave enough to confront sorrow? Could he reclaim that strength by walking into the shadows instead of running from them? The pen glided across the paper, each word an affirmation to himself. Gradually, a narrative took shape as Hayden explored his past memories. The conflicts and failures felt sharper, more defined, each moment rocketing through the haze of time. The answers were there. He just needed to be willing to face them. The following afternoon, when the group reconvened, Hayden stood before them with renewed resolve, clenching his notebook tightly between his hands. "I've spent the last week writing down my reflections," he began, scanning the room, gauging their interest. "I want to share with all of you an understanding of my journey, more than I ever have before." With each word, he felt the tension dissolve within himself. Instead of relying merely on the facade of a leader, he had tapped into the core of his being. Vulnerability was a strength he had often overlooked. The act of sharing his written thoughts felt transformative, a leap into the unknown yet buoyed by the collective courage of his peers. As he spoke about the various layers he uncovered, he felt not just a release but a profound connection with those listening. Their eyes reflected empathy, courage, and a willingness to engage more deeply. By confronting the specters of his past, he acknowledged that these fears no longer had the power to define him. Each narrative he unveiled provided a pathway for others to tread alongside him. Derek, who had been a quiet observer, leaned forward with an intensity that drew Hayden's eye. "It's incredible, Hayden. You've inspired me to dig deeper, to face my own shadows." The room buzzed with supportive murmurs, the atmosphere shifting toward mutual encouragement. Conversations blossomed. Others began to stand up and share, revealing their own fears and heartaches, spurred on by Hayden's bravery. Yet, as they shared, a new layer of conflict unfolded inside Hayden. The more he uncovered, the more he realized he was on the cusp of a deeper challenge. If he was ready to embrace his truth, how far would this journey take him? What about the darkness he still managed to keep at bay? The deeper memories of loss, the unresolved guilt surrounding his brother, the neglected self-doubt. Could he truly emerge without confronting these core anxieties? As the session wound down, he felt a mix of pride and trepidation. He had unearthed connections and fragmented truths, yet larger revelations loomed with each step deeper into his psyche. Would his newfound courage stretch far enough to guide him through uncharted emotional waters? Before leaving, he proposed they meet again, ready to tackle the heart's most daunting questions. "Next week, let us dig even further," he urged, feeling the urgency inside him rise once again, clamoring for more. "Let us not just share our stories. Let us explore the truths we've buried as well." The murmurs of agreement echoed around him, but a pulse of uncertainty shook him at his core. Did he have the stamina to genuinely explore these darker facets of his life? Or would the answers he sought continue to elude him? With the weight of such significant questions trailing behind him, a stark reality settled in. He had barely begun to unravel the depth of his own existence, and the hardest part was yet to come. As the days rolled into the next meeting, Hayden found himself grappling with a disquieting dichotomy. The closer he drew to revealing the raw wounds of his past, the more he sensed an impending dread lurking just beneath his resolve. He had witnessed the empowerment his vulnerability sparked in others, yet the shadows began to beckon him toward truths he had long avoided. Each evening, while he sat at his small kitchen table, his fingers traced the edge of the notebook, and he hesitated before lifting the pen. Empowerment felt intoxicating, but it held a cost: a confrontation with the ghosts that had lingered far too long. Every glance at his notebook ignited a flash of anxiety, reminding him of what lay beneath the surface. The guilt of not being able to save his brother, the self-loathing that came from feeling inadequate, and the anguish over unfulfilled potential that haunted his dreams. One night, as Hayden prepared to jot down more reflections, something stilled his hand. He questioned whether he even wanted to uncover these darker truths. Did the prospect of exploration outweigh the comfort of denial? Uncertainty coiled within him, wrapping around his heart like a vice. Could he continue leading others if he himself was still so fragmented? Determined to confront his fears, he devised a strategy. During the next group session, he determined to draw on his peers' collective experiences. If others could drive him to uncover truths, perhaps the support could help him navigate his own. Establishing trust among them was paramount. He would frame this imminent exploration not just as a personal journey but as a shared experience. When the day arrived, Hayden arrived early, his heart pounding. He arranged the chairs in a circle, symbolizing equality and openness. This space was to be a sanctuary for shared exploration, free of judgment. As members poured in, their warm greetings ignited a flicker of hope within him, each familiar face reinforcing the fragile barrier he had erected against his trepidation. "Welcome back, everyone," he spoke, his voice steady despite the tremor within. "Today, I want us to take another step forward, but this time let us bring our shadows into the light. I believe diving deeper into our shared vulnerabilities will illuminate paths we didn't know existed." He was met with nods and murmurs of approval, but inside, he wrestled with the stark reminder that his own vulnerability was far from a mere concept on a whiteboard. It was about to become all too real. Hayden shared a few sentences from his personal reflections, just enough to kindle engagement without fully surrendering himself. Eyes widened, a soft gasp slipped through the room as he initiated the conversations about loss, fear, and guilt, encouraging others to weave their own stories around similar threads. This time, he wasn't just looking for affirmation. He wanted to wield his emerging sense of strength as a catalyst for collective healing. As stories unfolded, he felt the tension shift. Each soul bravely laying bare their struggles ignited an empathetic wildfire. It was precisely the honesty he hoped to cultivate. Yet as he listened, the weightier aspects of his truth loomed ominously in the corners of his mind, threatening to overtake him if not unleashed. Encouraged by the rawness surrounding him, he felt almost compelled to unearth the deepest fears that haunted him. But as he leaned into that impulse, an aversion arose. What if in voicing his buried fears, his leadership faltered? Would exposing the full measure of his grief undermine the strength he needed to guide others? Then, amidst the revelatory atmosphere, Derek spoke out. "Hayden, now that we're sharing so deeply, I get the sense there's still more we're all tiptoeing around. What do you think the core of your struggle is? What truly clouds your heart?" The question hung in the air, a delicate thread snapping in the quiet expanse. As Hayden wrestled with his hesitation, realization flooded his senses. Derek had sensed it. The invitation to confront the last bastion of his pain stood before him, cloaked in the guardian of the group's shared vulnerability. The moment stretched, teetering on the precipice of revelation. Would he plunge into the depths of the darkness within himself, exposing the guilt that wore him down? Or would he again retreat, preserving the facade of the unshakable leader? "What if I'm not ready?" Hayden questioned silently, gripping the edges of his chair as determination wrestled with fear. The answer swelled inside him. Perhaps this time, the response manifested not in retreat but in the release that awaited when he finally shed all the layers. If he could openly face his darkest fears, could he finally transform them into the very strength that would support not only himself but everyone within the circle? And so, with his heart pounding, Hayden prepared to step into the void, contemplating the unfamiliar terrain ahead. But as the group fell silent, another question surfaced. Chilling and intoxicating, had the moment of reckoning finally arrived? The room grew heavier with anticipation as Hayden took a moment to breathe deeply. This was his opportunity to transform his pain into power, not only for himself but for those gathered to share in this journey of authenticity. A surge of clarity washed over him. He wouldn't just be confronting his guilt, but rather reclaiming his voice amidst the cacophony of doubt. "I lost my brother," he began, the tremor in his voice betraying the weight of his confession. 3 years ago he passed unexpectedly, and I was supposed to be there for him. I thought I could save him if I were only present." His words hung starkly in the air, vulnerability piercing through the protective shell he had constructed. He could feel the group's collective intake of breath, their rapt attention promising safety. I held on to that guilt for so long, convinced that his loss was a reflection of my own failures, of not being enough. The silence engulfed him like a warm embrace, urging him to continue. I buried my grief in the belief that showing my emotions would make me weak and deter others from seeking my guidance. But now, standing here, I understand that this pain doesn't define me. It is merely a chapter in my story. I can't heal until I confront it. A swell of empathy filled the room, punctuated by nods of understanding. He dared to look at Derek, who seemed visibly changed by this revelation. "When I kept my truth hidden, I thought I was protecting myself and you all. But I realize now that vulnerability cultivates connection, that sharing our burdens lightens the load for everyone. As he stepped into this honesty, he felt the constrictive grip of guilt begin to loosen. Each word he uttered allowed a piece of his heart to liberate itself, unfurling truths long suppressed beneath the weight of shame. The act of sharing connected him more deeply with the gathered souls, reminding him that everyone carried their own shadows and scars. And in doing so, he could redefine his narrative. I am ready to uncover all of my shadows included to facilitate our shared evolution. Together, we'll explore our vulnerabilities, transforming them into strengths that fortify our community. The room vibrated with emotion. As Hayden stepped back from the lectern, he felt an unexpected buoyancy wash over him. Embracing his grief had led not to despair but to a profound sense of clarity and direction. Each shared story that followed revealed how pain could weave a tapestry of compassion among them. Derek, the seasoned naysayer, caught Hayden's eye, a new softness gracing his hardened expression. I didn't realize how much we've all been carrying until you opened the gate. I want to help pull back the curtain on my past too. I fear that I held onto my pride, thinking it makes me strong, but it only isolates me. As others chimed in, sharing their respective struggles, Hayden witnessed a true metamorphosis unfold. Each voice lifted another, creating a safety net within the circle where acceptance prevailed over judgment. The healing power of honesty didn't merely border on catharsis. It catalyzed an unforeseen renaissance for the group, anchored by Hayden's willingness to confront his truth with grace. Once a solitary mechanic bound by shame, Hayden had become a beacon of authenticity. He had conquered his insecurities, showing that pain could become an asset rather than a liability. His transformation rippled outward, encouraging others on similar paths of revelation. As they concluded their exchange, Hayden felt recognized for who he had become, a guide ready to lead others through the labyrinth of their own shadows. In sharing his journey, he had officially shed the identity of a mere mechanic. He was now the architect of a dialogue with historical depth and personal weight. Before parting, he proposed, "Let us continue this story-sharing circle outside of these walls, inviting more voices to create a broader narrative of our community. True resilience is found not in silence but in our willingness to be heard." Cheers erupted, the room alight with newfound spirit. Individual transformations converged into a collective aim anchored in power and authenticity, shifting the landscape of their relationships entirely. With each brave step taken, Hayden achieved an indelible connection, proving to himself and the townsfolk that vulnerability could lead to authentic strength and unity. He had accomplished an extraordinary feat. He had rewritten not only his legacy, but instigated a ripple effect of healing within his community, a tangible shift from fear to empowerment. This was the moment he had longed for, a true reclamation of identity, rising from the ashes of the past while illuminating the path for others to walk in their truth. The citizens now understood the importance of authenticity fueled by raw narratives. They embraced their shared histories, redefining what their town could become. As he walked home that night, Hayden reveled in the solid confidence he now possessed, embraced by the realization that each step forward was an affirmation of his journey's worth. Now, as the story concluded, it stood at a tremendous precipice of transformation. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support and leave a like now to feed the algorithm. I want to hear from you. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your engagement matters. Been part of these extraordinary narratives and help bridge the path to personal growth.